He was 12 when they placed the crown on his head. He carried royal blood, and that blood became his sentence. His bride? She bore the same blood. Not just the same name, the same mother. Her name was Arsinoe, his Ptolemy II. He was pharaoh. She was his queen. And also his sister. This is not myth, not legend passed down through whispers. This is documented, carved in stone, sung in temples. They called it the marriage of the gods, a sacred union between siblings. Not a choice, a law. Ptolemy was not the first to marry his sister, but he was the first to make it official in Egypt, to declare that no woman outside his own blood deserved the throne. No outsider, no deviation, only blood, and no one dared to protest, because protest meant death, or worse, erasure. Before we descend further into shadow, a pause to understand where this began. In the Nile Delta, under sunburnt skies and pillars carved with both prayers and threats, Egypt was no longer ruled by Egyptians. The blood in Ptolemy's veins was Greek, an outsider ruling an ancient land, a general pretending to be a god. After Alexander's conquest, Egypt fell to his generals. One of them, Ptolemy, named himself Pharaoh. His son, and his son's son, would carry the mask. But with each generation, the need to appear Egyptian became more urgent. The old gods demanded incest. Isis and Osiris, brother and sister, husband and wife. Pharaohs must imitate the divine, or risk collapse. So incest became holiness, lust became loyalty, and marrying your sister became divine will. But behind that sacred mask was something else. Ptolemy II didn't just sleep with his sister. He needed it written, carved, celebrated. He had statues made of him and Arsinoe as living gods. Siblings, lovers, rulers. A trinity of taboo, sanctified by decree. He named her Philadelphos, the sibling-loving queen. Not whispered, proclaimed, but beneath the chants was control, fear. Women were dangerous, not for their beauty, but for their blood. A queen from another house meant another power. A wife from outside meant foreign influence. So he sealed the bloodline. Arsinoe was more than a queen. She was insurance. A living symbol of locked power. And symbols, even sacred ones, are not spared. No scroll recorded what she wanted. If she could refuse, if she tried, her silence is the loudest thing she left behind. And in that silence, a question. Was it about blood? Or about ownership? The nobles smiled. The priests nodded. But behind their eyes, doubt. Even in Egypt, where gods married siblings, this felt heavier. It was never about purity. It was about control. And when blood becomes currency, it demands to be spent even if it costs everything. Ptolemy and Arsinoe's marriage set a foundation for generations to come. More grotesque, more violent. It began not in love, not in lust, but in fear. And fear builds terrible dynasties. He was no longer just a king. She was no longer just a queen. They became prisoners of the blood they worshipped. And blood never forgets. In the palace of golden walls and silken drapes, not everyone was free. From a distance, Alexandria looked divine. Marble pillars reflected sunlight. White lotus bloomed in rooftop gardens. The floors were etched with names of gods. But inside lived those with no names. Power here smelled like incense and rot. It was a kingdom held together by blood, paranoia, and ritual. A kingdom that ruled through fear and disguised it with gold. It was the Ptolemaic era, a Greek dynasty ruling Egyptian land, pretending to be more Egyptian than the Egyptians themselves. They worshipped Isis, held mummification rites, stood beside gods in temple murals, and married their siblings, not from passion, but policy. They didn't marry for love. They married to control bloodlines. Because blood was safer than outsiders. Blood was predictable. Blood could be chained. But when blood is sealed in a closed circle, it begins to turn on itself. By now, every royal marriage was incestuous. Ptolemy II married his sister. His son continued. His grandson married his own sister, a girl locked in the palace since she was 9. She was taught that submission was sacred. That being wife and sister was her divine purpose. She had no name, only titles, only roles. No one asked what she thought. No one cared if she ever could say no. And when she bled, they celebrated. Not because she became a woman, but because she could now bear royal heirs. Children of pure blood. Children that would continue the sealed cycle. But those children were born different. Twisted limbs, empty eyes, wild tempers. They were not cursed. They were inbred. But no one would say it, because admitting it would mean rewriting the laws of gods. So they smiled and buried the dead children in silence. Each generation grew sicker, more paranoid, more violent. Ptolemy IV murdered his own mother, burned 12 boys alive in a rain ritual, roamed the palace at night, holding a dagger and mirror, not to shave, but to see if he was still human. No one stopped him. No one questioned him, because he was king, and kings could not be wrong. Even when they lost their minds, each throne was passed not by merit but by blood. A cousin, a sister wife, a child groomed by silence. Eventually, the bloodline became so tangled that no one knew who was father, son, husband, or brother. And no one asked. They just prayed the child on the throne would survive long enough to produce another. Outside, the city cheered for new gods. Inside, they buried yet another child with the name of a king before he could even walk. That was the price of purity. Not power, not peace, just blood. And so the palace remained golden. And the people bowed, and the names of gods echoed from the walls. But inside, the blood boiled. Behind the veils and incense, there were no lovers, no families, only roles, only duty, only names carved into silence. No one speaks their names anymore. Not the queens who died in childbirth, not the children buried before their second birthday, not the kings who forgot how to sleep. Their names were carved, then scraped, then replaced. Because too much blood, even royal, begins to rot. And it did. Children were born from brother and sister, then married to other siblings, then died. Again and again. Each generation tighter, each heir more brittle, and the palace quieter. Not from peace, but from fear. This was not holiness, not tradition. It was a prison, built from stone, walled by blood, and the ones inside stopped asking questions, because to ask meant to exist, and to exist meant to suffer. So they stopped. From the outside it looked divine. From the inside it was suffocating. A family so obsessed with staying pure, they forgot how to live. Sons feared mothers. Queens feared daughters. Everyone feared the child born next, because the blood might be too pure and too broken. And now, thousands of years later, we call it tradition. We admire the statues, recreate the architecture, sell postcards with their faces. But who were they, really? Girls who bled too early, boys crowned too soon, heirs who never became people. It's easy to judge the past. It's harder to ask, have we truly changed? Do we not still teach obedience over truth? Name over joy? Blood over self? How different are we when we demand silence from those born into legacy? There is no ending to this story, because the ending already happened. In silence, in burial, in the erasure of names we never learned to pronounce. And what remains is not legacy. It is absence. She was 13 when someone whispered, "The king has chosen." No one asked if she agreed. No one asked if she understood. From that day on, she was no longer a daughter, no longer a sister. She became queen. And her king was her older brother. They called it an honor. They told her the silk robes were sacred. The crown, a divine gift. The marriage, the will of the gods. She never heard the gods speak, only the rustle of garments, and the silence after saying yes. On the wedding day, the crown on her head left red marks on her skin. Too tight, too heavy, too permanent. They gave her a new name, Thea Philadelphos, goddess, sister wife. Her real name vanished. She learned how to walk, slowly, to smile without showing her teeth, to listen without responding. She learned how to enter the king's chamber, and how to leave it without leaving any trace. She wasn't taught how to speak. She was taught how to remain. No one asked what she wanted. They asked what she could bear. When she became pregnant, no one celebrated her. Only the continuation of blood, the preservation of dynasty, another heir, another number. The child did not know what to call her. Mother? Sister? She didn't know either. The child had 3 names, all for ceremony, none for love, and she had none. Time passed, and she remained. New girls arrived, younger, softer, quieter. They called them goddesses, too. She watched them walk through the same golden corridors, wearing the same white robes, carrying the same silence. She saw her own story repeat in others, until it no longer felt like hers. At night, she stood alone on the balcony. Above the gardens, the incense smoke curling around her hands. She looked down and whispered, "Was I ever real?" When she died, they embalmed her, placed her in a marble tomb, chiseled a single line, "Wife of the god, sister of the god, mother of the god." No date, no name, no voice, just a role, a silence, a missing person inside a perfectly preserved body. And no one cried, because crying would mean remembering her as a person, not a title. He was 4 when they brought him into the temple, a golden circlet too large for his head, a scroll too heavy for his hands. He could not read the oaths, but he was expected to rule. They called him the light of the dynasty, but he had no friends, no real mother, no laughter, only tutors, guards, silence. At 6, he stopped crying. At 9, he witnessed his cousin's execution. The boy had asked, "Why do the queen and king look the same?" That question cost him his life. No one ever asked again. Each heir was born from the same blood, brother and sister, again and again, and each one a little more unstable, a little more alone. By 12, he was given a wife, a cousin, a sister. It didn't matter. They were interchangeable. Their blood, the only thing that mattered. Ptolemy IV murdered his own mother, not out of hatred but suspicion. He believed she whispered rebellion to the statues at night. Then he burned 12 boys alive, to summon rain. At night, he wandered the palace halls, dagger in one hand, a bronze mirror in the other, not to shave, but to check if he was still human. No one stopped him. No one questioned him. Because in this palace, kings did not err, even if they were mad. Eventually, no one knew who was whose son. Uncles married nieces. Sisters married brothers. Children were born without distinction. The family tree twisted into a knot, and no one dared untangle it. By the time Ptolemy VIII reigned, the court was a crypt. He married both sisters, then his daughter, then had her executed. He ruled for 18 years, each year switching palaces, not for ceremony, but to avoid assassination from his own family. There was no trust, no affection, only blood, looped so tightly it strangled itself. By then, the throne was not a gift. It was a death sentence. Each child crowned knew the end was coming, knew that behind the smiles were poisoned goblets, knives beneath robes, hands eager to serve. No one ruled. They just outlived each other. Until they didn't. And one day, a girl would be led into the throne room, younger than the rest, smarter than the rest, and she would remember every crown, every blade, every ghost that came before her, and she would smile, not because she was happy, but because she understood. It's my turn now. She entered the throne room barefoot, 14 years old. The sun touched her crown before it touched her skin. They called her Cleopatra VII Thea Philopater, goddess, daughter, queen. But her father was dead, and her husband was her 10-year-old brother, not a prince from a rival kingdom, not a foreign ally. Her brother, that was the law. She did not protest. She did not cry. She learned, spoke 9 languages, read astronomy, law, philosophy, understood politics better than the priests. But knowledge could not unmake tradition. It could only survive it. She signed the marriage scroll. She sat beside her brother and smiled with her mouth closed. Because no one would listen if she screamed. But she did speak. Too much. Too clearly. She ruled too boldly, issued decrees, gathered advisors. The court whispered. She forgets she is not alone. And soon she wasn't. They exiled her, stripped her titles, sent her into the desert with only silence for company. But she returned not alone, with Julius Caesar. Not of her blood, not of her dynasty. He had what she needed. Power. He had what her brother did not. Teeth. Caesar restored her crown. Her brother drowned in the Nile. Another child buried with royal jewelry and no legacy. She married her other brother, a boy, 9 years old. Then, quietly, he vanished too. She ruled alone, and for a moment the bloodline breathed, diluted, changed, alive. Then Caesar died, and she turned again to Mark Antony, not her brother, not Egyptian, not pure, but real. The world called her dangerous. Rome called her a witch. Egypt called her impure. But she had children with foreign blood, unblessed by priests, unwanted by tradition. She did not care. The dynasty she inherited was already dead. She was just giving it a proper burial. When the armies came, when the gates broke, when Rome knocked, she did not run. She did not plead. She chose the serpent, not for love, not for drama, but because she was the last, and she would not be paraded. Not by Rome, not by memory. Her children were taken, one killed, one vanished, one forgotten. The name Ptolemy, never spoken in power again. Her tomb never found, her body never confirmed. Only fragments remain. A few coins, a few stones, a face on museum posters, smiling, but no one remembers. Why? You can visit Alexandria, You can stand where Cleopatra stood. You can touch the stone walls. But you will not find her grave. No tomb, no statue, no body. Only sea and silence. They erased her, not out of hate, but because forgetting was easier. Rome called her a witch. Historians called her a lover. But almost no one called her a daughter, or a girl, or a child. She wasn't the only one. Dozens of queens, hundreds of children. No names, no stories. Born to serve blood, born to die for it. No statues were raised for them, only rituals, only silence. We remember dynasties, but we do not remember the people inside them. Only the titles, the symbols, the child queens who bled too early, the boy kings who saw death before sunlight, the royal babies who never made it to their second name. Their stories were never carved, because their stories were not allowed to begin. And now, we call it history. We teach it. We dramatize it. We dress in costumes and retell it on stages. But rarely do we ask, what did it feel like to be one of them? No, we do not marry our sisters anymore. We do not mummify babies born of incest. We do not call girls goddesses and bury their names. But we still sacrifice people for legacy, for blood, for duty. Still demand silence. Still celebrate obedience. Still forget those who never got to speak. So maybe the dynasty did not end. Maybe it just changed its costume. And when we say Cleopatra today, do we see a person? Or a myth? Or just a woman who died quietly? Because it was the only thing she was ever allowed to do freely? There is no final line. Only breath. Only space. Only the question, what do we choose to remember? And what do we quietly let disappear?